Slut, get in there! A furious roar echoed through the dark night. Sophia Green, having just reached the lit wall, was shoved into the woodshed by the matriarch of the Cooper family. Slam! The door crashed shut and locked. Sophia Green hurriedly covered her belly, her trembling fingers gripping the small door. Her pupils contracted, and she almost blurted out, "Mother!" "Shut up! Don't call me mother! You're depraved, sneaking around, and bringing back a bastard child. You've disgraced our Cooper family. Just you wait, tomorrow when the master returns, he'll deal with you." Outside, the face of the Cooper family's matriarch was as cold as steel, her voice cruel and merciless. It seemed she couldn't wait to get rid of Sophia Green, this eyesore of a daughter-in-law, so she wouldn't have to see her again. Deal with. Sophia Green's already pale face now looked translucent, devoid of blood. Unexpectedly, after half a year of marrying into the Cooper family, she had always kept to herself, avoiding conflict, trying to live as an invisible person. But in the end, she still stood in someone's way, was repeatedly harmed, and now faced such a tragic end. "Mother, don't bother with this shameless woman. Leave this matter to me. It's late, you should go to bed." At this moment, another deep male voice sounded from outside the door. Inside the woodshed, Sophia Green abruptly lifted her head. Of course, she recognized the owner of this voice. Wasn't it her husband, Daniel Cooper, who had abandoned her on the day of remembrance and run away with another woman? His return was timely indeed. After half a year outside without a word, he returned and immediately dragged a physician to her, forcing an examination that revealed her pregnancy. Sophia Green silently gritted her teeth. The whole affair was bizarre, especially Daniel Cooper's action of throwing the physician at her. His expression at that time clearly revealed a hint of malice. The rustling sounds outside the door gradually faded, and unease filled Sophia Green's heart. Then she heard Daniel Cooper's voice again. "Sophia Green, I warned you not to dream of marrying into the Cooper family. You didn't listen, and this is your consequence." His voice was low and slow, as if he were speaking close to the crack in the door. To Sophia Green, it was like icy tendrils creeping into her body, sending shivers down her spine. "I only intended to test if you were truly perfect, but unexpectedly, it led to a surprising result." Suddenly, Sophia's eyes widened, a thought flashing through her mind. The next second, upon hearing the truth, she cried out in disbelief, "It was you! That night, you orchestrated everything! That person, the one who took my innocence, was arranged by you." She spoke with bitterness, resentment, and murderous intent. "Don't pretend. I don't know everything yet, but you're lucky tonight. However, tomorrow at the judgment court, you won't escape punishment." Daniel Cooper chuckled, a chilling sound that echoed through the air, as if everything was under his control. Inhumanly, he cackled, "Ha ha ha." Dressed in elegant attire, he strode forward, his gaze filled with arrogance. Then, he embraced the pregnant woman he had long awaited. Without looking back, he departed without hesitation. Sophia stood there, silent, her eyes wide, her hands clutching her sleeves tightly. She felt her heart constrict, her head spin, and finally, unable to bear it any longer, she collapsed to the ground. "Tang District! Tang District!" Her voice was weak, as if all her strength had been drained, her whole body trembling, with nowhere left to cling to. To end up like this in Tang District was something Sophia Green could never have imagined. No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't believe Daniel Cooper could be so cruel and heartless. To remove her from the position of young madam of the Cooper family, he didn't hesitate to ruin her reputation and even wanted to take her life. Such a man bore no resemblance to the young general he once was, no different from a scoundrel. Sophia Green gasped for breath, the thought of Tang District leaving her feeling empty and desolate. "Oh no! Fire! Fire!" But unexpectedly, while everyone was still worried about Tang District, that very night, a massive bolt of lightning struck the dilapidated warehouse where Sophia Green was staying. Instantly, flames erupted from the piles of firewood inside, the fierce blaze illuminating the sky above the Cooper estate. Daniel Cooper's house was the closest. Informed by a servant, he hastily reassured the woman beside him, threw on a coat, and rushed out the door. The area around the warehouse was in chaos. The steward directed the servants to extinguish the fire, but the flames were too intense to be put out quickly. Fortunately, the warehouse was isolated, preventing the fire from spreading to the other buildings on the Cooper estate. Seeing Daniel Cooper emerge, the steward, wiping sweat, ran to his side. "Young master, the young madam is still inside." Before he could finish, Daniel Cooper glared coldly. "Who is the young madam?" "That's the harlot." "Ah, right, the harlot is still inside. Should we unlock the door to save her?" "Unlock what?" Daniel Cooper sneered, looking up at the sky. He noticed the lightning-filled night sky, devoid of rain. His eyes narrowed, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Even heaven won't allow her to live and continue to disgrace us. That's why lightning struck her dwelling. In that case, we should follow heaven's will and prevent others in the Cooper estate from being harmed." Having said that, his gaze drifted towards the warehouse. He saw the locked warehouse door being violently shaken by Sophia Green from inside. The door seemed about to give way, as if with a little more time, Sophia Green could break free. Daniel Cooper's brows furrowed. He slightly raised his hand and said to the steward, "Tell the firefighters to be careful not to let the fire spread. As for the woodshed, it can't be saved. Abandon it." The steward bowed his head and replied, "Yes, sir." But as he was about to leave, Daniel Cooper called him back. "Find 2 trustworthy men and seal the woodshed door for me." The steward was momentarily stunned but didn't dare to object and immediately turned to leave. Only then did Daniel Cooper let out 2 cold laughs, his grim face appearing even more sinister and ruthless under the flickering firelight. As if the person struggling inside the woodshed was nothing more than an insect, her life as fragile as paper. Meanwhile, within the woodshed, Sophia Green clung to a sliver of hope. Seeing the fire hadn't reached the door yet, she strained with all her might to pull it open. A flicker of joy crossed her face as the door budged, but then the sound of hammering from outside reached her ears. Sophia Green's face instantly paled, understanding dawned on her, her body went limp, and the door remained stubbornly shut. The fire in the woodshed intensified, billowing black smoke quickly suffocating Sophia Green. Her vision blurred, her head swam, and soon, her consciousness began to fade. Her already sallow, thin face was now smeared with soot. The hammering continued outside, but she was lost to the smoke. Her eyes rolled back in her head as she succumbed to unconsciousness. Inside the woodshed, rats and cockroaches, panicked by the flames, scurried frantically, scrambling over her, their shrill chirps echoing before they vanished without a trace. Judgment Court, I truly believed everyone's heart was the same, wishing only to avoid bad people, never expecting to encounter such a wolf in sheep's clothing. 5 years later. Billy, tell me, should I help him? On a rafter, 2 figures lay sprawled, one large, one small. To the left, a small boy, his face etched with worry, stared intently down at the 2 men grappling below. His face was screwed up, resembling a little bun. I think, when we're out and about and see injustice, we should naturally draw our swords and help, right? Even though I'm only 5 years old this year, I still have a burning heart of passion. Yes, we should help. The boy propped his chin on his hand, continuing to watch the 2 fighting men, muttering a determined monologue to himself. But, I'm also worried. That other guy seems pretty tough too. If I help this one, will I also become a target? This is a very serious matter. Very serious. Having said that, the boy switched hands, propping his chin on the other one, watching the 2 men below continue their boisterous brawl. He blinked, his long, dark eyelashes seeming to flutter with an exuberant life of their own. Suddenly, the boy froze, abruptly turning to look at his mother, who had remained silent. His face darkened. Mother, you weren't listening to me again. That's disrespectful, you know? You, like this, mother. My adorable, kind, and beautiful son is on your left, why are you looking to your right? The boy's slightly high-pitched voice finally drew the attention of the woman on his right, who had been lost in thought. Sophia Green blinked, then raised an eyebrow in surprise, looking at her son beside her, and asked quizzically, Billy, what did you just say? Billy glared at her, cheeks puffed out, looking as if he didn't want to pay her any mind. Seeing Sophia's inattention, his gaze fixed once more on the corner of the tavern where the tall, thin figure stood. His eyes narrowed slightly. 6 years had passed, 6 years since she'd last seen anyone from the Cooper family. Unexpectedly, today, she encountered Daniel Cooper in this small tavern. Sophia Green's lips curled into a cold smile. Seeing him, she immediately recalled how the Yu family had treated her 6 years ago. No, that wasn't right. It shouldn't be said that it was her, but the real Sophia Green, the woman who always lived harmoniously with life, but was bullied in every way by the Yu family. In the end, while giving birth in a deserted temple, she was still pursued and killed by assassins arranged by Daniel Cooper. If it weren't for Sophia Green's nanny, Mrs. Margaret Taylor, secretly rescuing her from the Yu family's warehouse and constantly hiding, caring for, and helping her, it's likely that even Billy wouldn't have been born. It's a pity that, although the child was born safely, she lost her life due to difficult labor. Ultimately, this led to a modern person known as a medical genius, with an eccentric and peculiar personality like hers, entering that body. She had used the last of her strength to give birth to Billy. Having just transmigrated and immediately facing childbirth, it was truly miserable. Mother, so tell me, should I help or not? Billy finally couldn't hold back. Seeing his mother not speaking, he started nagging and asking repeatedly. Sophia Green silently suppressed the anger in her heart, almost wanting to chop the despicable villain Daniel Cooper into pieces. Following Billy's gaze downwards, only then did she clearly see that a large empty space had been cleared in the center of the tavern. Two men were fighting fiercely, surrounded by a crowd that was both excited and scared, standing aside and watching, but no one dared to step forward to intervene. Sophia Green glanced quietly, then turned back to look at her son with an amused expression. Who do you want to help? The one in white. Billy's eyes sparkled, immediately pointing at the thin, somewhat more handsome man, then rubbing his hands. Sophia Green raised an eyebrow, humming softly. The one in white has strong martial arts skills. He doesn't need your help, it's unnecessary. Oh, is he more skilled? Billy started to feel dejected. A small frown unexpectedly appeared between his eyebrows. The boy stood up, a little unhappy. But in the next second, his expression became excited. Then, how about I poison the man in white first, and then appear as a savior, rescuing him? Mother, tell me, will he be grateful to me? The corners of Sophia Green's mouth twitched twice, looking at her son with an extremely strange expression. After a moment, she reached out and touched the boy's forehead. Billy, this despicable and shameless behavior, who taught you that? Of course, it was you, Mother. Billy replied confidently. Sophia Green narrowed her eyes, tilting her head slightly to look at her son. Who are you talking about? That saying raised them without teaching, the father's fault. Billy's confidence weakened as soon as he saw his mother's expression. Every time it's like this, you can't argue back, you just look at me with that you don't need to eat lunch, dinner, or even supper look. I'm scared. I'm your mother, not your father. Sophia Green reached out and pinched her son's soft, bun-like face. Billy shrank his head back, his small body twisting and turning, then carefully turned his back, arms and legs wrapped around the pillar, starting to cry silently. You clearly tell me every day that you are both father and mother, single-handedly raising and caring for me, working so hard to raise me, yet now you don't admit it. Prostrate, her frail body ached. Initially, she'd envisioned molding her son into a fine young man, upright, kind, and brave. But how had things deviated so drastically? She sighed silently, turning to Billy, his back to her, shoulders feigning a tremble. She briefly considered kicking him down right there. However, a glance revealed Daniel Cooper in the corner, setting down some silver before rising to leave. Sophia Green's brows furrowed. Without a word, she patted Billy's shoulder. Stay put, dear. Mother has some business to attend to. With that, not waiting for a reply, she nimbly climbed onto the roof. Soon after, she slipped silently down, following Daniel Cooper's shadow as he left the tavern. Billy, dumbfounded, blinked his wide eyes, watching his mother disappear from view. He propped his chin on his hand, brows furrowed in worry. Mother had left without a clear answer. Should he help or not? Oh, Mother was so unreliable. Grandmother would have been better. He glanced down from the rafters. The two men below were still fighting fiercely, but as he'd observed, the white-clad man was gaining the upper hand. Billy watched a while longer, nodding, finally reaching a momentous decision. His gaze retracted, breath catching in his chest, as he rummaged through the small pouch at his hip. After a long search, he retrieved a delicate porcelain vial. Popping the lid, he chuckled. The fight below seemed to be nearing its end. The white-clad man's movements had slowed, almost toying with his opponent. Billy grew impatient. He had to act now, before the opportunity vanished. Aiming carefully at the two men, he slowly tilted the vial, pouring its contents towards the white-clad man's arm. My mother's 7-year poison. Guaranteed authentic, no scams. Instantaneous transformation. He muttered, pink lips moving enticingly. The powder in the vial was indeed fast-acting. Upon contact with the white-clad man's injured arm, it induced dizziness, chest tightness, and a ghastly pallor, as if he might collapse and die on the spot. The white-clad man staggered. Billy, eyes narrowed in a smile, saw his faltering steps and prepared to retrieve the vial. Suddenly, the man looked up, hawk-like eyes fixed on Billy, sharp and menacing. Startled, Billy lost his footing and fell from the rafters. It's over, it's really over. To die so young, after only 5 or 6 years of life, what a cruel fate. My head feels like it's splitting, everything's fading. The heavens are merciless. I haven't married, haven't had children, haven't found a man for mother. How can I die so ignominiously? It's over, it's truly over. Spending so much time with mother, her murderous aura must have rubbed off, cursing me to this end. Mother, Billy can no longer serve you. Remember to give birth to a little sister for me. Hey, why doesn't it hurt? Billy suddenly opened his eyes, astonished as he looked at the white-clad man holding him, running quickly outside. His round eyes widened, staring at him for a long moment before reacting, beginning to struggle, his limbs flailing wildly. Put me down. What are you going to do? Let me tell you, I don't like men, and I especially don't like old men like you. You, luring children is illegal, you'll die without a burial place. Billy yelled. Where is he taking me? Mother clearly told me to stay put and wait for her. If she comes back and doesn't see me, she'll definitely skin me alive. The white-clad man panted, looking down at Billy with fierce, cold eyes, and said, Shut up, or I'll kill you. After saying that, his pace quickened. Billy quickly covered his mouth with his hand, only able to stare at him with wide, round eyes. After staring for a while, his eyes started to sting, and Billy sighed. All right, he's injured and poisoned, his mood isn't good, it's unavoidable that his words are harsh. I'm magnanimous, I won't hold it against him. Seeing that Billy was no longer speaking, the white-clad man finally looked away, putting all his effort into running forward. At this moment, Billy vaguely realized that there seemed to be someone chasing after them. Billy was stunned. Could those people be his accomplices? This time, I'm really doomed. Will he never see his mother again? Mother, your son is in danger, quickly transform into black and white impermanence to save me. Sophia Green sneezed loudly, hurriedly covering her mouth with her hand to avoid being detected by the person in front. But the space between her eyebrows couldn't help but furrow, feeling as if someone was cursing her from behind. She shook her head, trying to dispel the random thoughts in her mind. Her eyes narrowed slightly, continuing to stare at the two people in front. Suddenly, she saw Daniel Cooper separate from his subordinates and walk into the Tian man in ahead. Her eyebrows couldn't help but raise, and she smiled as she followed him inside. The Tian man inn was crowded and bustling. As soon as Sophia Green entered, a waiter rushed over and asked, Miss, are you looking to rent a room or? I'm here to find someone. Sophia Green ignored him, and after saying that, she tossed him a silver ingot, successfully shutting him up, making him happily step aside to attend to his own business. She quickly walked up the stairs, and as soon as she looked up, she saw the door of a guest room creak shut. As expected, Daniel Cooper must be here. Her eyes swept across the second floor. The construction of this inn, while the first floor was bustling with dining, the second floor used for resting was very quiet, with a peaceful scene and a pleasant atmosphere. Sophia Green stepped to the side, took 2 more steps, silently observing the surroundings of the room, but couldn't find any place to hide and eavesdrop. At that moment, she secretly sighed. However, she still hadn't given up, waiting a little longer nearby. Unexpectedly, her luck wasn't good, as the person inside opened the door and walked out, looking displeased as he approached the stairs and called for the waiter downstairs. Sophia Green's eyes lit up. While he had his back turned, with the agility of a cat, she slipped into his room and hid behind a screen. She held her breath, and just then, Daniel Cooper returned to the room, followed by the same subordinate. "Well, any news?" Daniel Cooper's voice held a hint of urgency. His brows furrowed before he even sat down. The subordinate took 2 shallow breaths before shaking his head. "Master, I just went to that house. The master of the house said that the person left 2 days ago. As for now, we don't know where he is." Daniel Cooper slammed his fist on the table, furious. "Late again?" Seeing his master's foul mood, the subordinate sighed inwardly. After a long hesitation, he finally spoke softly, "Master, we've been away from the capital for over a month. If we don't return soon, I fear His Majesty will be displeased with your abandoning your duties. I'm afraid it will implicate the entire family. Please consider. We finally have a lead on him, and now you want me to go back? They said he was in Zhongchang just 2 days ago, so we'll search for a few more days. Perhaps we can find him. Even the imperial physician said that only the ghost doctor can cure Lily's illness. This time, no matter what, I must find the ghost doctor. Even if I have to force him, I will bring him back to treat Lily." Daniel Cooper's voice was a mixture of anger and worry, his tone laced with anxiety. However, Sophia Green, hidden behind the screen, froze, a cold smile playing on her lips. Fanton, Daniel Cooper had left the imperial capital and traveled thousands of miles to Zhongcheng just for her. How ludicrous! What talent did she possess to warrant such effort from him? Her eyes flashed sharply as her mind raced. Daniel Cooper, he was indeed calculating, wanting her to treat Lily Snow. Humph. She could go, but would he dare let her treat her? If something unexpected happened, causing that person to die, or even leading to her own tragic end, it wouldn't be surprising. After all, Lily Snow had played a significant role in the events of 6 years ago. She had been lenient enough not to seek him out for revenge. Now he dared to come to her himself. If she didn't oblige, wouldn't she be letting herself down? Outside, the subordinate's voice drifted from behind the screen, laced with worry and discontent. "Master, what if the ghost doctor has already left? Besides, we've heard he's a recluse. We can't be sure money alone will entice him." Daniel Cooper shot him a cold glance, his voice sharp. "David Cooper, you're talking too much today." David Cooper immediately stiffened, lowering his head and falling silent. Not a peep escaped him, and the room became eerily quiet, punctuated only by the occasional clinking of teacups and the soft breaths of the 2 men. Sophia Green, behind the screen, frowned slightly. If these 2 didn't leave, she certainly couldn't leave the inn. How troublesome. Billy was waiting for her at the tavern. If she didn't show up, who knew what kind of trouble that brat would cause? Sophia Green thought of the restless little imp, unaware that Billy Green had already fallen into someone else's hands, his mouth covered, his face a picture of helplessness, as he was carried away. His small hand, covering his mouth, eventually grew tired. Despite the white-clad man's threats to stay silent, he tried to hold back, but couldn't help but blurt out, "Hey, if you keep running like this, the poison will spread throughout your body, and then even the gods won't be able to save you. Of course, I don't care if you're saved or not, but if you die, I'll definitely be abandoned in this wilderness, with no one to hear my cries. I haven't even married yet, haven't enjoyed good food and drink, and I'll die young like this. It's a great loss for our entire nation, you know?" The man in white frowned, his figure flickered, and in an instant, he slipped into a dark alley. He covered the boy's mouth and crouched, concealing themselves. Soon, the group chasing them ran past the alley's entrance, their figures receding into the distance. The man in white breathed a sigh of relief, then his face turned cold. With one hand, he lifted Billy and placed him on an abandoned wooden shelf. He extended a hand towards the boy, his voice icy, "The antidote." Billy blinked, tilting his head to look at the sky. "Wow, the weather's beautiful today. Blue sky, white clouds, and even a few little birds flying by. Their wings are so pretty. The breeze feels nice too, makes me sleepy. Give me the antidote, or I'll take your life. The man in white pressed the tip of his sword against the boy's neck. His already pale face now looked even more ashen. Swords are heartless, you're scaring me like this, I'll faint. Really faint. Believe me, I'm about to faint, really faint, fainting right now. Billy babbled. The corners of the man in white's mouth twitched twice, but the sword in his hand didn't budge an inch, his gaze growing colder. The antidote. Billy didn't understand why his threats weren't having any effect. Not cute at all. He glared at the man, then closed his eyes, feigning readiness for sacrifice. There's no antidote. Kill me if you want. But I'm warning you, if you really kill me, you'll die too. You. The man in white had never encountered such an annoying child. Soft approaches didn't work, neither did harsh ones, and even with a blade at his throat, the boy could still spout such nonsense. His gaze shifted to the small bag at the boy's hip. He snatched it, rummaging inside. Finally, he stared at the vials and paper packets, his face darkening. All of them were labeled poison. He nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. Billy, unconcerned, watched him search. Seeing him find nothing, he smugly retrieved his bag, his face beaming with delight. But the boy also knew when to push his luck. Seeing the man's clear impatience, he figured it was time to lay down his terms. Where's the antidote then? The poison in your body isn't incurable. Humph. The man in white sneered, seemingly seeing through his intentions. Years of training prevented him from being easily threatened, even by a mere child. There are countless doctors in Zhengchang. Do you think I can't find someone to cure the poison in me? But now that you're in my hands, I have plenty of ways to make you wish you were dead. Billy's eyes widened. What's going on? Is this guy trying to ruin everything? This is infuriating. As expected, nobody likes him. Humph, don't even dream of it. Only my mother can cure my mother's poison. Even if you searched every doctor in the entire Fengshan kingdom, they wouldn't be able to cure you. The man in white raised an eyebrow, his gaze finally softening as he looked at the quickly covered mouth of the child before him, amusement dancing in his eyes. If that's the case, I only need to return you to your mother. With you in my grasp, surely she wouldn't refuse to hand over the antidote? Billy felt a wave of dread wash over him. If he led this man to his mother, she would definitely turn her back on him, refusing to acknowledge this foolish child. Such a thing hadn't happened just once or twice. Mister, you've got it all wrong. I heard my mom doesn't have the antidote. It's on me. Really, I'll find it for you. After saying that, the boy lowered his head, rummaging through his poison-filled bag, diligently searching with a serious expression. But the man in white didn't believe the boy would compromise so easily. He was definitely up to something. Rather than letting him concoct some devilish scheme, it would be better to deal directly with his mother. With that thought, the man snatched Billy's bag, saying softly, "No need. I'll take you back to the tavern we were just at. I think your mother will be looking for you there." Billy's eyes widened in alarm, he felt like this was truly the end. The man in white, ignoring Billy's distressed face, prepared to carry him away. But before he could lift Billy, a strange sound echoed from the sky, followed by a plume of purple smoke rising into the air. The man in white's face changed. "Master!" Billy glanced at him curiously, only to see the man strike the back of his neck without hesitation, rendering him unconscious. Then, the man scooped Billy up and ran towards the purple smoke. Billy was jostled throughout the journey but remained in a deep sleep, unaware of anything. When he finally awoke, he was in a cold room, devoid of any human presence, let alone the man in white. Billy hurriedly sat up, lifting the blanket to check himself. Seeing his clothes were still intact, he breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, my honor is still preserved. Otherwise, how could I face the people of Jiangdong? A burst of unrestrained laughter suddenly erupted from outside the window. Billy, startled, without a word, rolled back into bed, wrapped himself tightly in the blanket, closed his eyes, and yelled, "I'm asleep." The person outside paused for a moment, then placed a hand on the windowsill, lightly leaping into the room, landing steadily inside. He looked towards the small bundle on the bed, the smile on his lips widening as he stepped closer. "So you're the child Matthew Carter brought back?" Billy kept his eyes tightly shut, not uttering a word. His mother had told him, in unfamiliar places, observe the situation, understand the surroundings, then act. Don't talk to strangers casually. Actually, he thought, it was mainly because he was too cute, too adorable, making him irresistible. Surely many bad people wanted to kidnap and sell him. So, now he had to play dead. Seeing him remain motionless, the man grew even more amused, taking a few more steps forward and sitting on the edge of the bed, continuing to chuckle. "Ha, little one, are you hungry? Want something to eat?" Billy kept his eyes closed, his long, dark eyelashes fluttering slightly, especially when he heard the mention of food. His small throat couldn't help but gulp, and saliva started to pool in his mouth. "Kid, what's your name? I heard you're the one who poisoned Matthew Carter. Why did you do that? Did he wrong you somehow? I heard you poisoned Matthew Carter, you were perfectly fine, why did you poison him? Did he offend you?" Billy couldn't really hear what he was saying, only feeling. He really wanted to eat. Really wanted to eat. Really wanted to eat. "Kid, you're on our turf now, the food, the lodging, it's all ours. So, let me tell ya, if you lift the poison from Matthew Carter, I'll take you to get some grub, alright?" Billy's eyes were wide open, his heart started to cheer and shout, wanting nothing more than to rush over and grab the speaking man's hand. "Kid, the food here is top-notch, especially the crispy fried chicken, everyone raves about it." "I guarantee you," the man hadn't finished speaking when a knock came from the door. He paused. "What is it, in the middle of the night?" "Master is looking for you." The man was slightly taken aback, then looked back at Billy lying on the bed. He paused for a moment, then stood up. "All right. Let's go." With that, he didn't say another word to Billy, just walked past the blackboard and out the door. Only after the sound of the door opening and closing, the footsteps outside, one after another, gradually fading away, did Billy dazedly sit up. How could this Samuel Harris be like this? He was just about to agree, how could he leave without a word? At least he should have told him where that delicious crispy fried chicken was. Oh dear, his drool. Billy vigorously wiped his mouth, then immediately threw back the covers. Turning his head, he saw his bag placed right next to the bed, and without a second thought, he picked it up and slung it over his shoulder. Well, his mother always said, one must be self-reliant, he would go find that delicious crispy fried chicken himself. Billy carefully opened the door, there was absolutely no one outside. Right then and there, he felt strange, his face wrinkling in confusion. This place, had a very mysterious feeling, yes, very mysterious. He just didn't know what kind of person the one they called Master was. What if it was his mother? Oh no, his mother must be looking for him everywhere right now, he had to go back quickly. But, what about the delicious crispy fried chicken? His mother or the delicious crispy fried chicken? His mother, delicious crispy fried chicken. Oh dear, which one was more important? Billy started to frown, squatting down, a little hesitant and unable to decide. Until a faint aroma slowly drifted past his nose, his eyes immediately lit up. Beloved mother and delicious crispy fried chicken were all thrown to the back of his mind. He sniffed, without a word, immediately following the direction of the aroma. As for the person he had just cast aside, currently hiding behind the screen in Daniel Cooper's room, eavesdropping on his conversation with his subordinates, a few ideas gradually formed in his mind. As night fell, Daniel Cooper rose, and with his men, left the room, seemingly intending to have dinner. Sophia Green's eyes narrowed slightly, and she quietly slipped out of the living room, quickly descending the stairs. The lower floor of the bountiful tower was now crowded with guests, almost packed. Her eyes swept over the scene, not finding Daniel Cooper and his companions, so she guessed they weren't planning to dine there. Immediately, she quickened her pace, hurrying out the main door and looking around the street. Sure enough, not long after, she saw those two familiar figures. Having stayed in Jiangcheng for over half a month, Sophia Green was even more familiar with the narrow streets than Daniel Cooper. In a flash, she quickly stepped into an alley, taking a shortcut to get ahead of him. When she saw them about 20 or 30 meters away, Sophia Green quickly bent down, placing a few coins in the bowl of a beggar sitting in the corner. "Young lad, do me a favor." The beggar's eyes lit up at the sight of the money. "Just say the word, miss. When those two come by, tell them something. Tell them that 5 days from now, a ghostly doctor will appear at the Hibiscus Inn on the southern outskirts of Jiangcheng. Healing the sick. Limited to 50 people. First come, first served. Isn't Daniel Cooper looking for her? Isn't he supposed to return in 2 days if he can't find her? So, let's prolong it for a few more days to see how patient he is." The beggar looked in the direction of her pointed finger. They didn't look like locals of Jiangcheng. Immediately, he chuckled, nodding vigorously. "Oh, rest assured, miss, I'll make sure everything is taken care of." Sophia Green smiled, nodded, and stood up. Then, she glanced at the two one last time before cheerfully turning and leaving, heading towards the tavern where her son was. However, upon entering, she found the previously bustling tavern now deserted. There were no customers left, only the owner and a few staff cleaning up the tables and chairs. Sophia Green frowned, a bad premonition flashing through her heart. She looked up at the rafters, but didn't see her son. "Damn it, where's that brat?" The tavern owner, seeing her, hurried over with an apologetic look. "Oh, honored guest, I'm so sorry, today our tavern." Before he could finish, Sophia Green grabbed his collar, her face cold, her eyes sharp and full of murderous intent. "Where's my son?" The owner trembled under her icy gaze. Momentarily frightened. "Oh, honored guest, please, let's talk calmly." Sophia Green grew more irritated, but she also realized she was taking her anger out on an innocent person. She took a deep breath and released her grip, but her voice remained heavy. "Have you seen a boy about this tall, dressed a bit unusually, around 4 or 5 years old?" The owner breathed a sigh of relief when she let go, but still took 2 steps back, carefully considering her words. However, he shook his head, his expression uncertain. Just then, a staff member working in the back, hearing the commotion, quickly approached and whispered, "I saw that boy." Sophia Green's gaze immediately shifted, staring intently at the staff member. He felt that although this girl looked soft and delicate, she possessed a sharp, compelling strength. Her aura was incredibly cold and intimidating. His heart couldn't help but jump, and he hastily lowered his head. At some point, the little young master had curled up on the rafters. Then a man in white carried him away. A man in white? Sophia Green frowned. The same man who was fighting someone earlier in the main hall? Yes. The waiter hastily nodded, recounting everything he had seen in detail. Including how, after the man in white left, the other man he'd fought with led a group of people in pursuit. Sophia Green's face darkened considerably, and she more or less guessed the situation. Most likely, her precious son had actually poisoned the man in white, leading to this disaster. "You little brat, the next time I see you, I'll skin you alive." Sophia Green snorted softly, thanked the innkeeper, and turned to walk out of the tavern. The sky had begun to darken. The distant sunset glowed red like fire, reflecting on the road ahead, casting a faint hue, creating a unique ambience. Sophia Green reached into her sleeve and pulled out a black porcelain jar. As soon as the lid was opened, she released a finger-length scorpion onto the ground. "Go!" As if understanding her words, the scorpion truly darted off at an incredible speed towards the left. Sophia Green looked up in the direction it moved, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. That area was entirely residential for the women of Jiangcheng, the houses arranged haphazardly, but none were without wealth or nobility. Could it be that the man in white was also the young master of a prominent family in Jiangcheng? Sophia Green quickly followed. The scorpion moved with remarkable speed, making several turns, avoiding the crowd celebrating the Chaoyang sect, finally crawling onto the gate of a house that appeared cold and austere. Sophia Green paused, immediately bent down, and opened the jar's lid once more. The scorpion stopped, quickly turned around twice, and obediently crawled back inside. Sophia Green put the jar away, looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly, carefully observing the large house before her. That man has a scent, this scorpion's guidance is certainly accurate. So, Billy is 8 or 9 times out of 10 asleep in this house. Sophia Green took 2 steps forward and gently knocked on the large door in front of her. She knocked twice, but there was no movement inside. She took a deep breath, gradually increasing her force, and knocked twice more. Still, there was no sign of a gatekeeper. She stepped back a few paces, looked up at the sign hanging high above, faded from 2 summers, snorted softly, losing her patience, and walked straight inside. The grand door swung open, revealing an empty space within. Sophia Green's pace slowed, her steps cautious as she ventured forward. Beyond the threshold lay a vast courtyard, a vibrant tapestry of blossoming flora, lush and radiant. A swift glance confirmed their harmless nature, common fragrant botanicals, nothing more. Sophia Green followed the meter-wide stone path, but after a mere 10 paces, a prickle of unease settled upon her, a sudden, inexplicable disquiet. Without hesitation, she turned back, retracing her steps. Yet, to her astonishment, the 10 paces she'd taken stretched into 20, then 30, with no end in sight. The straight stone path now twisted and turned, a labyrinthine maze. Every direction she turned, a wall of blossoms blocked her way. Pausing, she thoughtfully touched her chin. Could this be the legendary 5 elements 8 trigrams formation? No wonder this entire courtyard was devoid of even a single guard. A spark of excitement flickered in her eyes, fixated on the exit, so near, yet impossibly far. A soft chuckle escaped her lips. A first encounter indeed. I wonder if I possess the wit to escape. Sophia Green smiled, glancing upwards, then brushed the dust from a relatively flat stone beside her and settled down comfortably. Unbeknownst to her, on the second floor of a nearby building, a figure withdrew their gaze from the window, swiftly descending and hurrying towards the main hall of Carter Manor. Reaching the hall's entrance, the figure slowed, bowing their head respectfully with clasped hands. The doors of the great hall creaked open, revealing Matthew Carter, his face grim, clad in white garments stained with dirt and blood. His dark lips pressed into a thin line as he spoke. What is it? Lord Matthew Carter, an intruder has breached Carter Manor and is currently trapped within the 100 Flowers formation. Matthew Carter's brow furrowed, his poisoned face a mask of chilling severity, devoid of its usual gentle composure. He glanced at the respectfully bowed figure before him, his voice cold. Do you know who it is? Enter. Before Matthew Carter could finish, a deeper voice resonated through the hall. Both Matthew Carter and Samuel Harris, standing by the door, tensed, their expressions shifting to deference. Yes, master. Samuel Harris advanced a few steps, then, without raising his head, knelt on one knee in the center of the hall. This humble servant greets the master. Whom? A low voice emanated from beyond the curtain. The man addressed as master, exuding an aura of cold authority, reclined behind it, his feet propped upon a rectangular divan. Long, slender fingers idly stroked the Black Panther lying beside him. The Black Panther, with an air of elegant indifference, eyes half closed, only stirred slightly upon hearing its master's voice. The gaunt man's sharp gaze swept across the center of the hall. Who dares intrude? The man asked, his voice devoid of warmth. Master, the newcomer appears to be a noble lady of 17 or 18. Her attire is of the highest quality, and she is an unfamiliar face. Judging by her gait, she possesses no inner strength. This subordinate surmises she may be a lost noble's daughter. You may leave, the man dismissed him with a wave of his hand, a hint of impatience in his gesture. The messenger paused, startled. Yes, master. The man said no more, but Samuel Harris, standing before him, gave a cold laugh. Whether a stray young lady or a spy sent to Carter Manor, the outcome is the same. Once inside the 100 Flowers formation, none can escape. Let her fend for herself. If she is truly lost, then she can only blame her ill fortune and predetermined fate. Master has no time for such trifles now. This noble's daughter is not worth his concern. The messenger shuddered, nodding before retreating. The doors of the great hall closed once more. The man behind, showing no mercy, suddenly coughed twice. Matthew Carter and Samuel Harris simultaneously stepped forward. "Speak of the devil, and he shall appear." "As do I," the man said, raising a hand to halt their approach. "Humph, such a small wound won't take my life." Samuel Harris and Matthew Carter exchanged glances, worry flashing in their eyes. Though not fatal, their master's wound was far from trivial, as he claimed. Without proper care, recovery would be arduous. "How fares the poison within you?" As they fretted, another soft cough echoed from behind. Matthew Carter replied, "I sought Oliver Blake's counsel, but even he could not devise a cure." Samuel Harris turned to him in astonishment. "Even Oliver Blake is unable to resolve it?" "Indeed," Matthew Carter gave a wry smile, touching his still pale face. The skin beneath his fingers felt stiff, lacking its former warmth and elasticity. He suspected this was the poison's doing. Yet, strangely, aside from occasional bouts of weakness, he felt no sense of impending doom. He frowned, finally voicing his observation, "I believe this poison is not lethal, merely debilitating." "Even debilitation presents a grave concern." Samuel Harris furrowed his brow, his thoughts drifting to the child lying in bed, and shook his head. A smile touched his lips. "Matthew Carter, I think you should take the child to find his mother. Although you seem fine now, who knows what unexpected things might happen if this poison stays in your body for too long?" Mentioning this difficulty, Matthew Carter gnashed his teeth. "Just wait until I get the antidote, then we'll see how I deal with him." Samuel Harris chuckled softly. "The child doesn't seem like the type to casually take someone's life. Poisoning you seems more like a mischievous prank." The man behind them remained impassive, silently listening to their conversation, his fingers slowly stroking the soft fur of the Black Panther sitting beside him. Lifting his chin slightly, Matthew Carter suddenly spoke, "In that case, let's go see that child first." Matthew Carter stopped mid-sentence, his gaze shifting awkwardly towards the man, then falling silent. "Master, Oliver Blake said your wounds aren't suitable for excessive movement. I have the panther." With that, he straightened slowly, gently patting the panther's head. The panther immediately rose, its demeanor poised and proud. It lifted its head high, stepped towards the curtain, and let out a low, majestic growl, its presence dominating the surroundings. Although Matthew Carter wanted to offer further advice, Samuel Harris pulled him back, causing him to silently fume, but obediently hold his tongue. After all, this was their master's decision, not something they could change with a few words. He sighed inwardly, then could only raise his head and lead the way. The terrain winding, the three slowly advanced towards Billy's previous location. The Missouri estate was vast, originally several houses of a wealthy family joined together. There were 3 or 4 flower gardens alone, not to mention the considerable distance between the front and back courtyards. Thus, by the time they reached Emoshui Shen, where Matthew Carter had arranged for Billy to stay, the sky had completely darkened. As the door was pushed open, Matthew Carter frowned and called towards the bed, "Little rascal! Little rascal, little rascal!" Several calls rang out, but there was no response, not even a rustle. Before the Black Panther could enter, the man on its back spoke softly, "No need to call, there's no one in the room." "What?" Matthew Carter exclaimed, lighting the candle on the table and going directly to the bed. The entire bed was cold, devoid of any human warmth. His face darkened immediately. Where did that brat run off to? Samuel Harris entered the room chuckling, patting Matthew Carter's shoulder mockingly. "Ha, it seems the poison hasn't just weakened you, it's also impaired your hearing." Matthew Carter glared at him, his face grim, still laughing. "We need to find that child quickly. This Missouri estate is riddled with magical formations, he could lose his life if he's not careful." Samuel Harris closed his fan. "That's a valid point. Let's split up and search." The man on the Black Panther's back spoke softly. A flicker of tension crossed his cold, arrogant face. He stood up straight, looking into the room, then gently patted the panther's back. The Black Panther immediately turned, its gait noble and aloof. Behind them, Samuel Harris and Matthew Carter exchanged glances, only able to shrug helplessly. They hastily ordered the servants to search. The panther's pace didn't slow, the man on its back even closed his eyes, letting the cat carry him forward. Suddenly, the Black Panther halted, its fur bristling, a clear sign of agitation. The man's eyes flashed sharply, and he soothed the panther's back with a hand. The panther quickly calmed, even turning its head to nuzzle his palm ingratiatingly. Then, it turned towards the front door, letting out a low growl. The man's gaze sharpened, and he looked up at the stone door about 20 meters away. A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. 2 guards should have been at the stone door, but now there was no sign of them. He moved forward, letting out a low call. The panther resumed its pace, this time with an air of elegance. As he drew closer, he discovered the 2 door guards lying unconscious behind a large rock nearby. The man's expression immediately changed. As he looked back at the stone door, a chilling aura suddenly erupted from him, causing the Black Panther beneath him to grow restless. "Go in." He patted the panther and pushed open the heavy stone door. As the door opened, a soft, sweet voice reached his ears. "Delicious. Truly delicious. I knew following here wouldn't be wrong, hee." His gaze followed the sound. In the next instant, his imposing aura receded, and he looked at the swaying small creature with a complex expression. Perhaps hearing the sound, the boy named Billy opened his drowsy eyes and yawned widely. He asked with a grin, "Who are you?" "You're drunk." The man waved his hand dismissively. The Black Panther immediately darted out of the stone doorway and waited quietly behind the large pool. "Not drunk. This young master has always been able to hold his liquor." Don't talk nonsense." Billy, like a tailless koala, clung tightly to the wine jar in front of him. His small face was flushed, as if painted with the finest rouge, looking truly rosy. "I knew it, the white-coated uncle's house has good wine for me to drink. Hee, my medicine definitely didn't fail. My dog nose is very keen." The man frowned, unable to help but twitch. His gaze swept across the wine cellar, the tense expression on his face finally showing a slight crack. He bent down slightly, grabbed Billy by the thick collar of his coat, and lifted him up. "I'll take you outside." A child who looked only 4 or 5 years old, yet capable of causing such chaos in a large wine cellar like this, was quite something. Billy tilted his head, looking at the man once more, his eyes narrowing. A pitch-black hand reached out, touching your cheek. "Ha, you look quite handsome, half as handsome as me." Not bad at all." The man frowned, pulling the boy's hand away, his voice stern. "Don't touch things carelessly, or I'll chop off your fingers." Chop off my fingers?" Billy tilted his head, a dazed expression on his face, seemingly not understanding the meaning of the word chop. A moment later, the boy's eyes suddenly widened in horror, his voice filled with indignation. "Why chop off fingers and not toes? You're discriminating against my toes, you know? Don't think just because my toes are hidden in my shoes that you can ignore them. My toes also have blood, flesh, personality, and dignity. You. After speaking, the boy tilted his head to the side, closed his eyes, and fell into a deep sleep. The man stood there, momentarily speechless. He rubbed his forehead, feeling helpless. He gently scooped Billy into his arms, but he was injured. Though young, Billy was still somewhat heavy, and the slight movement tore at his wounds. The man winced, watching the blood on his chest slowly seep through his dark purple cloak. His face darkened, and without further hesitation, he turned and walked straight out the door. Outside, Matthew Carter and Samuel Harris had just rushed over. Seeing the unconscious child in his arms, they both breathed a sigh of relief, but the next second, the faint smell of blood in the air made their faces change drastically. They quickly stepped forward. "Ah, master." Samuel Harris frowned, reaching out to take Billy from him. "Master, let me take the child. Atienne, quickly call Wudong." "Yes." The man behind him bowed his head and immediately turned to leave. Matthew Carter frowned at the child Samuel Harris was holding, then peeked inside the stone door. This one glance nearly made the blood in his chest spurt out. No longer caring about anything else, he scrambled into the stone doorway. Immediately afterward, a tragic scream echoed, piercing the sky. The wine he had painstakingly brewed, gone, all gone. The man outside the door remained indifferent, but Samuel Harris's face changed dramatically. He looked down at Billy, clearly unconscious from drinking. But he remembered the newly brewed wine had been stacked in rows on the shelves. Could this child have drunk it all? Could a child drink that much wine? Could something happen? Matthew Carter was still inside, heartbroken. Samuel Harris observed silently, glancing at his emotionless master, and asked softly, "Master, was it really all this child?" He poisoned Matthew Carter, likely after smelling the wine on him. Drinking the wine was his ultimate goal. The man, his gaze icy, looked towards Billy, then suddenly remembering the lad's drunken state, his eyes softened. He found the child rather amusing. Samuel Harris chuckled softly, shaking his head in amusement. Hearing Matthew Carter's furious roar, he quickly scooped up Billy and retreated 2 steps. "Ha, master, I'll take this little one to rest, lest he be torn apart by Matthew Carter." The man nodded, beckoning to the Black Panther, then gave Billy a meaningful glance before turning to leave. The commotion outside the stone door subsided, leaving only the sound of Matthew Carter's pained gnashing of teeth. Meanwhile, the culprit, oblivious to the world, was adjusting his pillow and sleeping soundly. When he woke again, the sky outside was bright. Warm sunlight streamed through the window, and Billy stretched comfortably, his eyes still closed. Only when he felt an itch on his face did he wrinkle his little nose, grumbling as he raised a hand to scratch. He then saw a strange yet familiar scorpion resting on his small palm. Billy's languid air vanished. He shot up in bed, staring at the small scorpion. "Chloe Belle, did mother send you? I'm done for. I've been gone for a day and a night. Mother must be fuming, fit to burst, blood pouring from her 7 orifices, ready to skin me alive. I need to find a gold bar to appease her." As he spoke, he swung his legs off the bed. But as his small feet slipped into his shoes, he paused, shaking his head and muttering, "No, no. I drank wine, I must detoxify that gentleman in white. But I don't know where he is." He sighed, looking down at the scorpion in his hand. "Chloe Belle, go back and tell mother I'm safe. It's my overly kind heart. I have no choice, after all, I'm a unique and unparalleled handsome lad, the first and last of my kind. Unlike mother, a venomous beauty." The scorpion twitched its tail, finally reacting to his words. Billy nodded in satisfaction. "You agree with me, don't you? You truly are my confidant. All right, it's decided." With that, he got off the bed, found his bag, took out a small porcelain bottle, and poured the green powder inside onto the scorpion's back. "Go! You must convey the key message that I am a kind-hearted, handsome young man, causing outrage among all. Tell mother." The scorpion twitched its tail again, released its pincers, turned, and darted away so fast that Billy was left in a cloud of dust. Only then did he think that the scorpion truly understood his urgency. Chloe Belle ran like mad, incredibly fast, and soon returned to Sophia Green, who was meditating on a rock. Glancing at the color on the scorpion's back, Sophia Green finally breathed a sigh of relief. Billy was safe, and she no longer needed to worry. She could leave this cursed place. She didn't understand breaking formations, but she was very experienced in forcing people to show their faces. Sophia Green looked up at the midday sun, its scorching rays burning her skin. Her eyes, following the wind as it danced through the flowers and leaves, brightened. Before her lay a small, exquisite pond, crucially, it held water. Sophia Green jumped in, a mirror in hand, angling it to catch the intense sunlight. A sizzle, then a whoosh, the dry brush to the southwest ignited. Panic filled the face of the man bursting into the darkened hall. "Master, the woman who infiltrated 100 Flowers' garden has set a fire." "What?" Samuel Harris surged forward, fury etched on his face, seizing the messenger. "Which woman?" She's at the pond." A southwest wind blew, darkening Samuel Harris's expression further. People had been trapped in 100 Flowers' garden before, finding escape difficult, but this was the first time anyone had been brazen enough to set fire to the flowers, a suicidal act. "Master, let me capture her." 100 Flowers' garden, meticulously arranged by their master, held plants cultivated in a specific formation. If destroyed, their master's painstaking work would be lost. Samuel Harris ground his teeth, imagining the woman's gruesome fate. The man seated on the chair lifted his gaze, expression unchanged, but his hand tightened around the black panther he stroked. The panther stirred restlessly, glancing at Samuel Harris before closing its eyes again. The man replied, "Yes." Relief evident in his demeanor, Samuel Harris hurried from the hall, heading towards the 100 Flowers garden nearest the gate. Sophia Green narrowed her eyes, listening to the approaching footsteps. She knew the inhabitants of this estate were not simple folk. As soon as a fire started, someone would rush to extinguish it. Unfortunately for them, as soon as they doused one flame, she lit another. She would see whether the flammable plants or their buckets of water proved more resilient. Trying to keep me here? To traffic me? Stop it. Finally, after she'd set 3 separate fires, a figure raced towards her across the pond's surface. Face grim, he stopped before her, knocking the mirror from her hand. Sophia Green rubbed her stinging hand and laughed. Oh, finally, some sign of life. Wasn't this the same man who'd caused a ruckus in the tavern earlier? He seemed approachable enough, but his smile lacked warmth. Young lady, do you understand the consequences of setting fires within the Missouri estate? Samuel Harris looked up, momentarily stunned by her gentle, delicate appearance. However, the memory of the flames and her mocking tone instantly sparked his suspicion. He knew appearances could be deceiving. This young woman's actions contradicted her looks. She was likely not, as he'd initially assumed, a lost rich girl, but someone with a different purpose for infiltrating the Missouri estate. Sophia Green glanced at him, shrugging innocently, I don't know the consequences. I don't know anyone from the Carter estate. Besides, I can't be blamed for this. I've been locked up here all night, tired and hungry. Look at my face, I've lost so much weight. As she spoke, she moved closer to Samuel Harris's face, causing his expression to stiffen. He hastily leaned back. Miss, you could have called for someone. Sophia's voice rang out, call for someone? Don't joke with me. I've been calling all day and night, until my throat is raw. Listen, isn't my voice hoarse? But even if I called until I collapsed, I wouldn't see a single ghost. To protect my life, I had to start a fire. Sophia Green said, glancing at him mockingly, it's unexpected that as soon as I started a fire, someone came to put it out. Tell me, what's going on? Did the people of the Carter estate deliberately ignore my plight? If so, I don't think this fire is unjustified at all. Samuel Harris didn't expect this woman to be so sharp and shameless. Along the way, he repeatedly consoled her, recounting her situation during the 100 Flowers formation. She had spent the entire night comfortably and leisurely, let alone calling for help, she hadn't even opened her mouth to speak. In the evening, she even found a flat, clean rock to sleep on, with a small blanket, neither cold nor hungry, not even bitten by insects. It was as if she had come to the Carter estate to enjoy the flowers and admire the moon, truly indulging herself. Honestly, this was the first time Samuel Harris had seen someone trapped in the 100 Flowers formation so relaxed, not panicking at all, and even destroying the Master's formation. Especially since this person was a young girl, looking only 17 or 18 years old. Samuel Harris's eyes narrowed. If this woman had no malicious intent, it would be fine. But if she had other motives, it would be a big problem. Well, what's done is done. Come with me to see the master. Knowing he couldn't argue with her, Samuel Harris decided to take her to see the master. Sophia Green frowned, Master? Is it that man in white or someone else? Before she could figure anything out, Samuel Harris lifted her arm, pulling her whole body forward. Sophia Green's expression immediately changed, picking me up without asking? I'll count to 3. If you don't put me down, you'll bear the consequences. Samuel Harris paused, lowering his head slightly. Seeing her serious and cold expression, he realized she wasn't joking. Hesitation flickered in his heart, his steps unconsciously slowing, finally stopping and releasing her. Sophia Green rubbed her arm, snorting, lead the way. Samuel Harris actually took 2 steps forward, but then stopped abruptly, silently berating himself. This is Carter Manor, he is half its master, why should he listen to this strange woman before him? But having already left, returning to drag her along would seem erratic. He hesitated so long that they unknowingly arrived outside the main hall. Samuel Harris immediately composed himself, entering with a respectful solemnity, bowing his head to the man seated on the dais. "Master, she has been brought." No sooner had he spoken, and before his master could reply, Sophia Green's footsteps echoed from behind. Samuel Harris's lips twitched involuntarily, instinctively shielding her slightly. Sophia Green looked up to see the man on the dais lower a veil, obscuring his sharp features. A cold voice then emanated from behind the fabric. "Name?" Sophia Green raised an eyebrow, seemingly deaf to his words. Even a fleeting glance allowed her to sketch his contours. Sharp angles, a pallid complexion. More intriguing was the sleek black panther lounging beside him, igniting a possessive spark within her. Seeing her disregard his master's query, Samuel Harris frowned, glancing at her and murmuring a low reminder, "Master asks your name." Sophia Green glanced at him, still unconcerned, only lifting her gaze slightly towards the man on the dais. "Did you arrange the courtyard's formation?" "Silence. How dare you address the master with such disrespect?" Before the man on the dais could speak, a frigid voice cut through the air from behind a nearby pillar. Sophia Green turned, noticing a woman standing to Samuel Harris's left. Red lips, white teeth, a captivating face, and a figure as supple as polished jade. Were it not for the sharp tone, Sophia Green might have mistaken her for a delicate, obedient, and lovely flower. Sophia Green withdrew her assessing gaze, returning it to the man on the dais. "I'm fascinated by formations. Teach me." "Audacious. What gives you the right to make demands of the master?" "Silence, Oliver Blake." The enigmatic man finally spoke, a slight lift of his finger silencing Oliver Blake's sharp glare, leaving only a resentful scowl directed at Sophia Green. A cold sweat slicked Samuel Harris's brow. He knew his master's patience was wearing thin. He knew even more clearly that if this woman uttered another displeasing word, she might become a meal for the panther at his master's side. This woman was either incredibly brave or utterly ignorant of fear. No one dared speak to the master in such a manner, not even he, Matthew Carter, nor colleagues like William Thomas, would presume to request instruction in the esoteric arts from their master. Not only did she fail to answer the master's question, but she also pressed further. Samuel Harris discreetly shifted aside, distance from her seeming the wisest course. Sophia Green, sharp-eyed, caught his movement and sneered inwardly. Before she could utter a word of mockery, the man on the dais spoke in a frigid voice, "You destroyed my 100 flowers formation. You should be begging for your life. What makes you think I would teach you anything?" Sophia Green's eyes lit up. His voice, though icy and imposing, held a languid, sensual allure that captivated her. "What makes me think?" "The fact that I can heal your injury." Samuel Harris and Oliver Blake's faces hardened simultaneously, their gazes fixed on her with a sharp intensity, as if ready to strike her down at the slightest provocation. Seeing their hostile stances, Sophia Green's lips twitched. "Can't you show a little backbone? Do I look like someone who'd exploit another's vulnerability? How did you know I was injured?" The man on the dais was momentarily taken aback. He was certain his breathing was even, his movements controlled, betraying no hint of his severe injury. Yet, this woman, having just arrived, somehow discerned his condition. "Oh, it's nothing. I just smelled a faint trace of blood as soon as I entered." The scent of blood? Not only the man on the dais, but Samuel Harris and Oliver Blake also furrowed their brows. Incense burned in the hall, and if any scent permeated the air, it was only that of the incense. They detected no trace of blood. Could this woman's sense of smell be that acute? Oliver Blake scoffed, "Lies. I personally dressed the master's wounds. There's no blood on him. There's no scent of blood. You barged into the painting manor with ulterior motives. Or perhaps, you're in league with the one who injured the master." "I'm not." Samuel Harris eyed Sophia coldly, a flicker of disapproval in his eyes. Such words should not be uttered lightly. "Isn't this a self-confession?" Sophia Green raised an eyebrow, her gaze finally settling on Oliver Blake. So, you treated your master's wounds. No wonder he's still so frail. Truly, an unparalleled incompetent. Notably, their master remained silent, offering no rebuke to the woman. This only fueled Oliver Blake's simmering resentment. Humph, you call me incompetent? What are you then? You barged into Carter Manor and destroyed the master's flowers. According to the manor's rules, you should be fed to the Black Panthers. Yet, you have the audacity to critique my medical skills? You should worry about yourself, lest you die without knowing why. Sophia Green couldn't help but admire her. Was this woman subtly hinting to her master that he could execute her? Judging by her agitated and hostile demeanor, could she be harboring feelings for her master, fearing Sophia's intrusion? My goodness, if that's truly the case, her perspective is incredibly narrow. Does she think every man is throwing himself at her? She's a mother, a wife, for heaven's sake. Is your verbosity fueled by anger and loss of control, or by a guilty conscience, knowing your medical skills are lacking? Sophia Green's voice held no trace of anger, her tone was calm, clear, and pleasant to the ear. The man beside her raised an eyebrow, observing her composure. A rare smile touched his lips, carrying a hint of admiration. Oliver Blake's frustration intensified, especially with the master and Samuel Harris still present in the hall. She found herself at a disadvantage, overwhelmed, her face drained of color. Her fists clenched at her sides, a malicious glint flashing in her eyes. My medical skills lacking? I am Elder Stone's sole disciple. No one in this world dares question the medical expertise of Elder Stone's disciple. Who are you to judge? Elder Stone. Sophia Green blinked, the name vaguely familiar. Turning to Samuel Harris, she asked, "What's this about Elder Stone? Is he famous?" Samuel Harris's lips twitched, wondering what backwater this woman had crawled out of to not know of Elder Stone. Elder Stone's medical skills were unparalleled. Officials, nobles, and commoners alike revered him as a reincarnation of Huatua, the legendary physician. However, he lived in seclusion in the mountains, rarely seen. Many with grave illnesses struggled to find him, despite their desperation. Oliver Blake was his sole disciple, inheriting the entirety of Elder Stone's medical knowledge. So remarkable? Sophia Green thoughtfully stroked her chin. I must meet this Elder Stone someday. Discussing medical arts is a passion of mine. But such a remarkable figure, why take on such an inept disciple? And his only one at that. If Oliver Blake truly inherited all of Elder Stone's expertise, then this reincarnated Huatua is nothing but a fraud. Seeing Sophia Green's silence, Oliver Blake finally breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't believe that even invoking her master's name wouldn't subdue this argumentative woman. Now, she waited to see what else Sophia Green could possibly say. But just as she anticipated a crushing victory, a frantic cry erupted from outside, "Master!" Something's happened. Everyone in the hall was startled. The man who entered frowned, his voice deepening, "Benjamin Young is gravely injured. I fear." A disheveled man in black, his hair wild and his face grimy, rushed in. 4 or 5 other men followed, carrying a stretcher. On the stretcher lay a figure drenched in blood. Samuel Harris's face paled. He hurried to the injured man's side. Seeing his darkened face and blood-soaked body, his pupils constricted sharply. He whirled around and roared at Oliver Blake, "Examine him." The stretcher was swiftly lowered to the ground. Oliver Blake's complexion turned ghastly. Without a word, she pulled open the blood-soaked outer garment of Benjamin Young. With just one glance, she couldn't help but gasp. This is... Sophia Green stood 3 paces away, taking a quick look before averting her gaze. However, she had clearly seen the wound the man named Benjamin Young had suffered. It seemed he had been stabbed by a dagger, the blade still deeply embedded in his body. The wound was near a vital point, making it impossible to remove the dagger carelessly. But what was even more worrisome was that the man had been poisoned, his meridians in chaos. The corner of her lips curled up in a sneer as she looked towards Oliver Blake. "You are Elder Stone's disciple? I truly want to see the extent of your medical skills. This time, I can." Witness it firsthand. Thinking of this, Sophia Green shifted her feet slightly. However, as soon as she moved, she immediately felt a cold gaze directed at her from somewhere. How could she forget that behind the curtain, there was still a master seated? In an instant, the hall felt like an icy cellar, enough to know that the master's mood was extremely heavy. Perhaps this man named Benjamin Young was also a very important subordinate to him. The corner of Sophia Green's lips curved, her smile deepening. Well. Samuel Harris anxiously looked towards Oliver Blake, his eyes full of expectation as he watched her. Seeing Benjamin Young's frail, thread-like appearance, his muscles tensed even further. Oliver Blake's right hand slowly reached out, then she bowed her head with a heavy shake. The poison is too deep, there's no way to use magic anymore. What nonsense are you talking about? Samuel Harris grabbed Oliver Blake's arm, his face contorted as he roared, you haven't even pulled out the dagger, haven't prepared an antidote, how do you know he can't be saved? Oliver Blake's arm was gripped painfully. She angrily flung his hand away, shouting, who is the physician here? I said he can't be saved, then he can't be saved. What good does it do to yell at me? Pulling out the dagger will only increase his pain, it's better to let him pass peacefully. Moreover, the poison in his body has already spread throughout his internal organs, even if I go prepare an antidote now, it's too late. Even if it's too late, you should at least try. You haven't done anything, just looked and made a conclusion, what kind of physician are you? I haven't done anything? Samuel Harris, don't push your luck. I am Elder Stone's disciple, I came to this Carter estate solely to serve the master. Now, even you servants are demanding I treat him, and when I can't cure him, you turn around and blame me? What gives you the right? Samuel Harris's face turned pale. He glared at Oliver Blake before him, but couldn't utter a word. Indeed, Oliver Blake had initially agreed to serve the master alone, so it was natural for her not to treat his friends. However, these men had at least lived with her for a long time, always fulfilling her every request. Even if they had to risk going to the rocky forest by the cliff to gather herbs, as long as she spoke, they would do it for her without hesitation. Right now, his closest companion lies grievously wounded, yet she hasn't lifted a finger to help, always drawing a stark line between herself and them. Servants of Carter Manor? Even the master never considered them mere servants, yet Oliver Blake acts so high and mighty. Seeing Samuel Harris speechless, Oliver Blake's chin lifted slightly. The frustrations of the day finally found an outlet, bringing a sense of equilibrium. Samuel Harris, if you still consider Benjamin Young a brother, I advise you to prepare his funeral rites. He has but 2 hours remaining. Humph. Sophia Green could swear that the derisive laughter wasn't intentional. It's just that, after witnessing such a dramatic display, she couldn't contain herself. Oliver Blake's gaze snapped towards her. What are you laughing at? Oh, my apologies. I simply thought Elder Stone's disciple is only so. What did you say? Sophia Green gestured towards the man on the stretcher, barely clinging to life. Don't understand? Let me be clearer. This man could have been saved. But he fell into the hands of a mediocre physician like you. Humph, truly a matter of fate. At these words, Oliver Blake's eyes widened, his expression shifting dramatically. Others in the hall stared at her in surprise. Especially the silent, aloof man, who now observed her intently. Oliver Blake laughed in anger. Humph, the likes of you are all talk. I'm a mediocre physician? Are you a divine healer then? Divine, I wouldn't dare claim, but the ability to pull him back from the gates of hell, I do possess. You can save him? Samuel Harris lunged forward, stopping abruptly before Sophia Green. She recoiled, holding him at arm's length. Back off. Why are you standing so close? Trying to scare me? The urge to twitch his lips was strong, but the situation was far too grave. So you're saying you can heal him? Then do it. So you say you can cure him, is that right? Then hurry up and do it. Sophia Green glanced at him. You say do it, I do it? I'm not one of your Carter Manor people. Why should I lift a precious finger? Precious? How shameless could this woman be? The man behind the curtain, hearing her words, breathed a sigh of relief, his deep voice echoing, "What are your conditions?" Sophia Green gave him a satisfied look. "Not bad, smart." She leaned slightly, extending a finger, a smile playing on her lips. "Answer me one question." Oliver Blake, scrutinizing her, sensed the situation slipping from his control and stepped forward. "Master, don't listen to her nonsense. This woman infiltrated Carter Manor with ill intentions. She couldn't possibly save Benjamin Young. Don't be fooled, Master." "Oliver Blake, don't you want Benjamin Young to live?" Samuel Harris glared at her, utterly disappointed. "Even if there's little hope, even if we have to clutch at straws, we must let this woman try." Oliver Blake whipped her head around, glaring at him. "I'm doing this for the entire Carter estate. If we let someone with unknown origins and suspicious behavior roam free, if something happens, can you bear the responsibility?" Samuel Harris replied, his voice cold, "The security of Carter estate is our responsibility. You just need to do your job." Oliver Blake wouldn't back down, retorting, "I'm part of Carter estate, I also have the right to worry about its safety." Sophia Green rubbed her ears, the buzzing of their argument irritating her. But the man behind the curtain seemed completely unaffected by their quarrel. He looked directly at Sophia Green and asked, "Is there a problem?" The argument between Oliver Blake and Samuel Harris stopped abruptly. Oliver Blake, incredulous, turned to look at the cold man behind the curtain. She couldn't understand why someone so suspicious would so readily trust this woman. Sophia Green chuckled inwardly, "It's a good thing this man has some sense, not listening to Oliver Blake and throwing me out. Otherwise, this Benjamin Young really wouldn't be saved." She smiled and asked, "May I ask your name?" Before she could finish, Oliver Blake angrily shouted, "Insolent! You're not entitled to know Master's name. Even I only know his surname, how can a strange woman like you have the right to ask?" Sophia Green, truly annoyed with Oliver Blake, glared back, "Why can't I know? I'm not your estate's servant. Am I supposed to call him Master like you? Or should I call you that instead, for politeness' sake?" "You." Oliver Blake was so angry she couldn't speak. Samuel Harris just pursed his lips, this time saying nothing more, his eyes fixed on the figure behind the curtain. The man standing there seemed slightly surprised, not expecting Sophia Green's question to be so simple. But he hesitated for a moment before softly saying, "After you heal him, I'll tell you myself." Sophia Green hummed cheerfully, she didn't necessarily need to know his name. She just couldn't quite determine Benjamin Young's importance to this master. If she made things too difficult, she might actually be thrown out. Right now, she couldn't leave Carter estate, her son was still here. She had to leave with him. Of course, she was also very curious about those formations. There was plenty of time. More difficult requests, like money, a house, a carriage, could be brought up later. Thinking this, she stepped forward, crouched beside Benjamin Young, glanced at him, and said to Samuel Harris, "Bring a brazier here." The hall was large, but the area on the ground was somewhat secluded, surrounded by trees and artificial mountains. Whether by the master's design or not, the light in the hall was dim. And Benjamin Young couldn't be moved right now, which would make things very difficult for her. Oliver Blake's face darkened considerably. Master had agreed to let this woman try, damn it. If this woman actually had some skill and saved Benjamin Young, what would her place in Carter estate be then? She feared even someone like Samuel Harris wouldn't take her seriously anymore. She gritted her teeth, her gaze falling on Benjamin Young. He was dead sooner or later, so why lie there blocking her path? With that thought, she composed herself, looked up at Sophia Green, and forced a gentler tone, "I hope you truly have the ability to heal Benjamin Young. Otherwise, the consequences are not something you can bear. And I advise you not to try anything funny, this is Carter estate, not a place for you to cause trouble." With that, she stepped forward, squatting directly in front of Sophia Green, as if supervising her. Her hands began to inch towards Benjamin Young's wound. "Pull out the knife, I have experience, let me do it." Sophia Green glanced up at her. Her eyes immediately turned to Samuel Harris, who had just brought in the heaters as instructed, and said, "Can you get her out of here? Her presence is disturbing me. If I get irritated, I might mess this up." Samuel Harris hesitated for a moment, but his only thought was how to save Benjamin Young. Hearing Sophia Green's words, he didn't hesitate to pull Oliver Blake up and push her out the door. Oliver Blake's eyes flashed, her hand almost touching the hilt of the knife, but it was too late, nothing could be done. She angrily withdrew her hand and shouted, "Samuel Harris, men and women shouldn't touch each other, don't you know? If you touch me again, you'll ruin my reputation." After saying that, she was about to turn around and walk back in. But the man behind finally spoke, his voice laced with annoyance, "Get out." Hearing her master's voice, Oliver Blake immediately froze, a hint of grievance in her eyes. Her expression made Sophia Green chuckle inwardly. She thought, who is she putting on this aggrieved act for? Her master is behind the curtain, how can he see it? Oliver Blake was quickly pushed out by Samuel Harris, clearing the air of annoyance. 2 large heaters were placed in the hall. With no one superfluous remaining, Sophia Green's attention immediately focused on Benjamin Young. Her fingers lifted Benjamin Young's eyelids, her expression immediately turning grave. Seeing her expression, Samuel Harris couldn't help but feel uneasy. He, along with Matthew Carter, Benjamin Young, and William Thomas, had served their master since childhood, and their bond was deep. Seeing Benjamin Young seriously injured and unconscious, especially after Oliver Blake had said he was beyond help, Samuel Harris couldn't help but feel distraught and heartbroken. Sophia Green turned around, rummaged through her belongings, and finally took out a black pill. Without a word, she directly placed it into Benjamin Young's mouth, the pill dissolving instantly. Samuel Harris wanted to stop her, but it was too late. He was about to ask what the pill was, but seeing Sophia Green's serious, undisturbed expression, he swallowed his words. Sophia Green quickly cut open Benjamin Young's shirt at the chest, revealing the knife embedded in him. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she supported him. Sophia Green glanced at Samuel Harris and made a slight hand gesture. Without a word, Samuel Harris immediately complied. Immediately after, Sophia Green grasped the hilt of the knife, carefully took a slow breath, and with a schnick, pulled the knife out forcefully. Benjamin Young's body convulsed uncontrollably, his pupils dilated, he groaned softly, and then fainted again. Blood spurted from his chest, unstoppable, gushing out. The sight horrified Samuel Harris, he even held his breath, but he still didn't dare to speak, only able to tense his face and watch Sophia Green. Sophia Green quickly located a point above the wound and pressed down hard without a word. Immediately, Samuel Harris saw the gushing blood gradually stop, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Sophia Green had only used a simple pressure method to stop the bleeding. This was only a temporary measure, and another method would be needed later, otherwise Benjamin Young would still bleed to death. "Give me the bandages." Only Samuel Harris was present, quick and nimble, so Sophia Green naturally could only order him around. As for their master, Sophia Green treated him as invisible, after all, he rarely spoke. If it weren't for the vague sense of pressure in the air, she wouldn't have realized someone was sitting behind her. She thought to herself, but her hands didn't stop moving. Fortunately, the wound wasn't too deep, and she'd been extremely careful when withdrawing the blade, avoiding any vital areas. Therefore, it didn't take her long to treat the injury, bandaging it swiftly and securely. However, the poison the man had been afflicted with was incredibly troublesome. The external wound was no longer an issue, but this poison was truly difficult to counteract. Samuel Harris anxiously asked, "This poison, can't it be cured?" Oliver Blake added, "The problem is the poison has seeped deep, that's the most dangerous part." As soon as he finished speaking, the breathing of the man behind them changed slightly, and even the Black Panther beside him sensed the unease, beginning to growl agitatedly. The man raised a hand to soothe the animal, calming it instantly. Sophia Green glanced at the man, thinking, this Black Panther is truly a treasure. Having such a panther by your side instantly elevates your presence. I wonder if I have a chance to take this panther home. With a pet like this, I wouldn't fear anything, anywhere. That Billy would be so envious. While Sophia Green was still pondering, Billy, upon seeing the Black Panther, had similar thoughts. Samuel Harris, increasingly worried by the lack of response, asked again, can it be cured or not? Sophia Green finally looked up at him, replying, I need time to formulate an antidote. Hearing this, Samuel Harris breathed a sigh of relief, but then heard the man behind them ask, how long? This is difficult to say. His condition is quite serious, but rest assured, while I prepare the antidote, I'll temporarily suppress the toxin in his body, preventing it from spreading. Sophia Green spoke sincerely to the man behind the silk curtain, but then thought, he can't see my sincere expression through the silk. She turned to Samuel Harris. He twitched his lips slightly, but upon hearing her assurance, his tense heart finally relaxed, and the hall fell silent again. Sophia Green knew Samuel Harris couldn't make the decision, he was waiting for his master to decide. 3 days. I give you 3 days, a cold, emotionless voice finally said. Sophia Green frowned, seemingly displeased. And reluctantly replied, 3 days is a bit short, but I'll do my best. I want certainty. Otherwise, the one who barged into Carter Manor, destroyed my 100 Flowers formation, and whose identity remains unclear, will face only one outcome. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, his fingers unconsciously stroking the Black Panther beside him. Sophia Green remained unfazed, seemingly oblivious to his emanating aura, and calmly replied, certainly. She thought, if I truly exerted myself, I wouldn't even need 3 days. I could use the Ice Deer pill to neutralize the poison right now, followed by careful recuperation for a full recovery. But I'm not ready to leave Carter Manor yet. I still need to know where my son is. At the very least, I need them to understand the immense difficulty I endured to save this man. She continued her internal monologue, these people don't seem ordinary, perhaps they can help me. The man behind the silk curtain seemed satisfied. Arrange for her to stay at Green Bamboo Courtyard. Take Benjamin Young down first. Yes. Samuel Harris bowed his head, his expression growing serious. Sophia Green turned, not sparing the man another glance as she quietly followed Samuel Harris out. After all, she had been trapped in the 100 Flowers formation all night, and now, after another long period of activity, she was truly both tired and thirsty, longing for a place to rest. However, she had only taken a couple of steps when that cold voice rang out again from behind her, Damian Black. The man fell silent after speaking. Sophia Green paused, bewildered, Damian Black. Damian Black. Yes. Is he telling me his name? It took her a moment to understand, and then 3 black lines appeared on her forehead. If he hadn't said anything, she would have genuinely forgotten the condition she had set, a condition she had come up with on a whim. She hadn't expected him to actually tell her. Damian Black. Why does that name feel so unsettling? Sophia Green shook her head, thinking, never mind, it's not something I need to worry about. A name is just a name. Right now, I should focus on recovering my strength and finding my son. Sophia Green followed Samuel Harris as they left. Only Damian Black remained in the vast hall. He continued to gently stroke the Black Panther beside him, his eyes slightly closed as he let out a long, suppressed breath. A hurried footstep sounded from outside the door. Though not heavy, the anger contained within each step was unmistakable. The newcomer, upon reaching the door, slowly composed himself, entering the hall with a calm demeanor. He bowed his head slightly, greeting, Master, I have returned. Damian Black straightened slightly, have you investigated? Yes. William Thomas replied with a single word, but then fell silent. Damian Black's lips curled into a cold smirk, whose side is it? It's. William Thomas hesitated, reluctant to continue. But he immediately sensed Damian Black's impatience. Not daring to conceal anything, he could only clench his fists and reply in a low voice, it's the madam. This time, it was the madam who ordered the assassination attempt on you, Master. The assassins were sent from the imperial capital. William Thomas's face grew even more grim as he spoke. Damian Black's gaze turned icy, and his hand, which had been stroking the Black Panther, stilled. He remained silent for a long moment before speaking in a heavy voice, she's certainly resourceful, managing to track me down to Jiang Chang. There's probably no one in this world as heartless as my mother. To attack her own son without mercy. Master, you have always been yielding, but the madam doesn't understand your heart and continues to press you. If this continues, I fear. Indignation welled up within William Thomas, especially when he thought about how gravely his master had been injured this time. If someone hadn't taken that blow for him, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The madam truly has no familial affection for you, master. Every attempt is so ruthless. Those of us who have served you for so many years sometimes wish we could act on your behalf and eliminate that heartless woman. Even if you were to punish us, even execute us, we wouldn't regret it. But if we did such a thing, it would put you in a difficult position as her son. Damian Black remained silent, his hand resuming its slow, methodical caress of the Black Panther. The panther, luxuriating in the attention, seemed oblivious to the tense atmosphere pervading the hall. William Thomas waited, the silence stretching, until finally a voice, neither loud nor soft, emanated from behind the curtain. Prepare to return to the imperial capital in 5 days. William Thomas, momentarily stunned, then overwhelmed with joy, responded quickly and clearly. Yes. Then, he couldn't help but frown. William Thomas, I sense your injuries. Damian Black glanced down, his gaze heavy, settling on his chest. Go and see Benjamin Young, he's been injured. William Thomas and Benjamin Young were cousins. Hearing of his cousin's injury, William Thomas's lips tightened into a thin line. After excusing himself to Damian Black, he turned and left the hall. With his departure, Damian Black was left alone in the hall. Damian Black raised a hand to rub his temple, the wound in his chest throbbing dully. Before he could suppress the pain, the Black Panther beside him suddenly stirred, agitated. Damian Black frowned, listening to the soft but cautious footsteps approaching the door. His expression darkened, and he barked, "Enter." As the words left his lips, a small head cautiously peeked through the doorway. Damian Black paused, his tense nerves instantly relaxing. It was the boy. He raised an eyebrow, soothing the panther with a hand, his gaze piercing the curtain to observe the small figure. How could Matthew Carter be so lax as to let the boy wander here alone? Billy, his little legs carrying him into the hall, looked around, finding it empty. He noticed the long, heavy curtain, sensing a presence behind it. The small boy, Billy, tilted his head, squinting to see more clearly. The figure remained motionless, like a wooden statue, silent as well. Asleep, perhaps? Or was it really just a statue? Unlike Sophia Green, Billy wasn't burdened by such hesitations. Driven by the need to know, he took off running towards the curtain. With a swift movement, the boy lifted the fabric. Damien, merely raising an eyebrow, his fingers still stroking the panther, watched with a hint of curiosity. He had always sensed something unusual about this child. Ah! Billy shrieked, eyes wide, and without another word, he lunged forward, throwing his arms around the Black Panther's neck, nuzzling his face against its fur. A panther. A real panther. Ha, it really is a panther. So cute. Come here, my darling, let me hug you, I'll love you. Billy squeezed his eyes shut, his small hands tightening their grip, almost choking the panther. A single bite could sever the boy's head. If not for Damien's hand gently stroking the panther's back, the hall might have been filled with the coppery tang of blood. He said nothing, merely observing the child's excitement. It seemed Billy had no recollection of their previous encounter when he was drunk. Panther, you like me too, right? Ha, of course. I'm handsome, stylish, and irresistibly dashing. You must like me, so do you want to follow me? Hee, of course you do. Your silent demeanor is a clear sign of agreement. Damian Black couldn't help but twitch his eyelids slightly. This child could talk to himself and make decisions, but he even wanted to lure away his Black Panther. This brat, was he looking down on his master? A Black Panther only acknowledges one master. As if understanding, the panther beside him bowed its head in a sorrowful nod, almost like a form of revenge. Billy only then seemed to realize there was another person present. He raised his small head, swaying it slightly, and stared at Damian Black. Are you Bobby's master? Bobby, how casually familiar. Damian Black chuckled coldly, humph, of course. Billy looked at him, then down at the Black Panther, then considered his own small stature, quickly realizing he was no match for Damian Black. In other words, force was out of the question. So, a softer approach was needed, but what kind? A pretty boy strategy wouldn't work. He was pure and innocent, and couldn't compromise himself. A beauty trap was impossible, his mother wasn't around, and he had no beauties to employ. Damian Black lazily observed him, eyes darting back and forth, clearly plotting something. He didn't underestimate the child. The mere fact that the Black Panther was docile in his presence told him this child wasn't ordinary, likely one of the few exceptionally intelligent ones. But was such a child truly involved in all this simply because of drinking? Go to Carter Manor with Matthew Carter? Billy thought long and hard, finally raising his head seriously and cautiously taking Damian Black's hand. Damian Black frowned slightly, pulling his hand away. Billy also frowned, mirroring Damian Black's expression with surprising accuracy, but this time, he grabbed onto his clothes. Damian Black, with some forbearance, let him. Bobby's master, can we talk? I refuse. Billy's expression immediately soured, his whole face crumpling like a discarded bun. You haven't even heard what I want to talk about, how can you refuse? A Black Panther has only one master. I don't need to guess what you're planning. Billy puffed out his cheeks, his small hand still clutching Damian Black's sleeve, glaring fiercely at him. After a moment, as if having made a momentous decision, he finally broke his gaze, looked down, then up, a flicker of emotion crossing his face before a radiant, dazzling smile bloomed. Fine, he'd make the sacrifice, beauty trap it was. Dear master, don't you find Billy utterly adorable? Damian Black suppressed a twitch at the corner of his mouth, slowly nodding, uncharacteristically patient with the child's nonsense. Yes, not bad. Then how could you bear to let Billy suffer such heartbreak and despair, a life of misery, ultimately withering away like a fallen flower? Blinking his eyes, Billy leaned almost his entire weight against him. Damian Black finally couldn't resist turning his head, his expression complex. You're a boy, why are you using idioms meant to describe women? Billy nodded. Well, that's not the point. I obviously know I'm male. If you doubt it, I can drop my pants and show you. What I mean is, just because I'm a boy, doesn't mean you don't understand how to care for me, protect me, and keep me satisfied, right? After saying that, Billy propped his chin on his hand. So, the pretty boy plan isn't going to work then. Damian Black became incredibly curious about what kind of extraordinary parents could raise such a peculiar child. Meanwhile, Billy's mind wandered, his gaze fixed on the Black Panther, burning with an intensity that even the panther could sense shifting the atmosphere. Damian Black glanced at him, his fingers obsessively stroking the panther's back, genuinely wanting to see what other strange ideas this child would come up with. Lost in thought, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps outside the door. Damian Black narrowed his eyes, looked up, and saw Matthew Carter rushing in. Entering the hall, Matthew breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing Billy, but then his pupils contracted in disbelief as he stared at the child's small hand clutching Damian Black's sleeve, speechless for a long moment. It was rare for anyone to get close to his master, let alone a strange child. While his master had held this boy before, it was when the child was drunk, yet this time, why hadn't he thrown the child out? Matthew Carter rubbed his neck, slowed his steps, and cautiously approached, speaking softly, Master. Damian Black slowly raised an eyebrow, glancing at him, as if waiting for an explanation. Matthew Carter scratched his neck again and forced himself to speak. The poison in me has been neutralized. Your conjecture was correct, Master. This child followed me because he smelled the alcohol on me. He was also surprised by the sensitivity of the child's nose. He had clearly showered thoroughly and changed into clean clothes, so there shouldn't have been any scent left. Damian Black nodded, then listened as Matthew Carter continued, I was planning to bring this child to you, Master. I had just reached Emosun's place when I ran into Oliver Blake. She was curious about the poison and took my pulse. Unexpectedly, this child took advantage of my distraction and, well, ran here. He winked vigorously at Billy as he spoke. The latter gave him a disdainful look, then shook his head, speaking seriously, Uncle Mo, haven't I told you, if you do something wrong, you should correct it. You clearly prioritized beauty over friendship, your eyes lighting up at the sight of a pretty woman, and ran after her without a second thought. And now you're shifting all the blame onto me. That's not good for your character, you know. Matthew Carter's eyes widened, and he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. What nonsense are you talking about? When did I run after her? Clearly, you. Damian Black raised an eyebrow and glanced at him, his gaze deep and dark. Matthew Carter trailed off mid-sentence, unable to continue, and lowered his head, cursing Billy in his mind. He would definitely settle both old and new scores with him later. Damian Black lowered his brow, glancing at the child beside him. Seeing the innocent blink of his eyes, he couldn't help but offer silent praise. This child, in terms of courage, ability, and intellect, is truly extraordinary. With proper nurturing, he will undoubtedly become a rare talent. However, his origins are unclear, and keeping him close could be either a blessing or a curse. Damian Black shot a look at Matthew Carter. Years of understanding passed between them, and Matthew quickly grasped his master's intent. Though surprised, he felt it was reasonable. It seemed his master wanted him to investigate the child's identity and background. But a proper investigation would require meeting the person Billy called mother. After some thought, he stepped forward and said in a low voice, "Master, I took the liberty of bringing this child back. His parents must be worried sick. I believe we should return him to them to ease their anxieties." Damian Black nodded slightly. Matthew Carter breathed a sigh of relief and moved to take Billy. Unexpectedly, Billy sprang to his feet with remarkable agility. Damian Black raised an eyebrow as the boy's serious voice rang out, "No, I can't go back now." "Why?" Matthew Carter frowned. Billy pursed his lips, his gaze flicking towards the Black Panther before quickly returning. Then, he stated seriously, "Uncle Matthew, although I gave you the antidote, you were poisoned for so long that the toxins haven't been completely purged. To take responsibility for my actions, I feel I must stay. I'm doing this for you." As if to emphasize the gravity of his words, Billy nodded vigorously. Matthew Carter twitched his lips. "Oliver Blake has already checked my pulse. There's no poison left in me. That old you something dong something is so annoying." Billy immediately pouted, his small face still scrunched up like a bun, looking very serious. "Oh, come on, I told you, it's because you just took the antidote, so your pulse is temporarily normal. But in 2 days, no, just tomorrow, it will relapse. If you can't find me then, you'll be dead as a doornail. And then you won't be able to eat delicious food, drink fine wine, or embrace beautiful women. I told you I don't embrace beautiful women. Forget it, I'm such a fool to even explain it to you." Matthew Carter waved his hand, completely ignoring the boy's threats, and stepped forward. "I'll take you home first and meet your mother. Maybe she can detoxify me." "See mother?" Billy's eyes widened in horror, his small body shrinking back against Damian Black. "Are you kidding?" If his mother knew he almost died from drinking, she would surely pretend not to know this foolish child. Therefore, he absolutely couldn't go out. Damian Black quickly noticed the boy's resistance. He glanced at the small figure and raised a hand to stop Matthew Carter. "In that case, let Billy stay for a few more days. We'll wait until I'm certain the poison in you is completely gone before taking him back." Billy froze, turning his head to meet Damian Black's probing gaze. His small heart pounded twice, hard and fast. Had he discovered Billy's little plan? Impossible, he'd covered his tracks so well. "Surely not, don't scare yourself." Matthew Carter opened his mouth to speak, but ultimately said nothing. Damian Black, however, watched with amusement as the child clung to him. He truly wondered what the child's purpose was in staying, or was it simply for the wine? Damian Black's suspicions were soon confirmed. That very night, Billy stealthily crept into his room. Damian Black was sitting there, rewrapping the bandages around his chest, when he heard the footsteps outside. The sounds were soft, lacking the careful, steady tread of a martial artist, instead carrying the clumsy fumbling of someone engaged in shady business, unfamiliar with their surroundings. Damian Black frowned, blew out the candle on the table, and silently waited as the footsteps drew nearer. Billy had been very careful, yet still tripped several times. Bruises quickly blossomed on his smooth skin, painful enough to make his small face scrunch up. Ouch, gonna die. Billy kicked the small step in front of him, getting up grumpily. Ouch, why's there a flower pot here? Ow, and this too. Billy immediately jumped back 2 steps, rubbing his arm vigorously. Ouch, this broken pillar's gonna kill me. Billy smacked the pillar in front of him, his whole body aching. Hidden in the shadows, the corners of someone's mouth twitched as they watched the small figure under the moonlight, encountering a series of mishaps with every step. They really wanted to appear and tell him that if he continued to mutter incessantly like this, he'd likely wake the entire household. Everyone would come to see what the commotion was. But the Mo family had given explicit instructions to ignore the child. They had even, seemingly intentionally or unintentionally, pointed him towards the master's room. Honestly, they felt that so many people were being dragged into this, and the child, without a shred of self-awareness befitting a would-be thief, was truly making it difficult to face anyone. In his room, Damien, with his frighteningly sharp senses, heard almost every word Billy muttered. It was just that at this moment, he suddenly doubted whether his approach was correct. This child, on the contrary, seemed more like he was swaggering towards him, issuing a challenge. After more than half an hour, Billy finally managed to open Damien's door in the unfavorable lighting conditions. Half of Billy's body was already inside the room, looking left and right. Seeing no one, a flicker of surprise crossed his face as he stealthily stepped inside. Strange, so late at night, where had he gone? Billy stood in the middle of the room, while Damien sat alone in the secret chamber, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Oh well, never mind, it's better that he's not here. After all, he didn't come to see him anyway. Billy took a few more steps, carefully pulling a small night pearl from his chest. As his small hand opened, the entire room instantly brightened, revealing all the furnishings within, including the Black Panther crouching in the corner, its eyes fixed intently on Billy. Billy's mouth involuntarily watered. He then pulled half a carrot from his pocket and approached the Black Panther. Good Bobby, don't shout, don't make any noise, okay? I'll give you this yummy treat. The Black Panther languidly lifted its eyelids, staring intently at the carrot in Billy's hand, its gaze complex. It felt insulted, its pride as a panther wounded. Who in their right mind would feed a panther carrots? Not wanting to pay attention to Billy, the Black Panther closed its eyes again. Billy took a few more steps, bringing the carrot closer to its mouth. Bobby, look how nice I am to you. We've only met once, but I feel like we've known each other for a long time, so I immediately brought you something delicious to share. Are you touched at all? Actually, you don't need to be touched, that's not right. If you're really touched, you have to listen to me, got it? The Black Panther didn't even bother to lift its eyelids, completely ignoring the boy. But Billy wouldn't give up, still holding the carrot to entice it. So we're friends now, right? If so, I'm sure you won't mind if I sit on your back, right? Damien couldn't help but chuckle softly. If Billy's scent wasn't already familiar to the Black Panther, the boy would have been its meal by now, let alone a carrot appearing here. Billy was always good at understanding others, even animals. He thought that since the Black Panther didn't bare its teeth, attack, or growl at him, it meant it had tacitly agreed. So, he didn't offer the carrot anymore, but without a word, climbed onto its back. The Black Panther, seemingly unaccustomed to anyone other than Damien approaching it, shook its head slightly in annoyance. But Billy thought it was a sign of friendliness, so he excitedly climbed up, finally settling firmly on its back, breathing a sigh of relief. Let's go, I'll take you out to see the world. Don't worry, I'll buy you good food. When we meet my mom, she'll definitely buy you lots and lots of carrots. A look of horror flashed in the Black Panther's eyes. Lots of carrots? Hadn't this boy humiliated it enough? This was outrageous. If it weren't for its master's orders, it would have long since thrown the small boy off its back. It was always aloof and arrogant, not easily approachable. No one, except its master, had ever dared to sit on its back. Billy patted the Black Panther's rump. Let's go, but we have to be quiet, we can't disturb anyone, understand? The Black Panther seemed reluctant, its head turned towards the secret chamber, as if reproaching its master for using this child to insult its intelligence. However, the secret chamber remained silent, without a stir. The Black Panther let out a long sigh, reluctantly carrying Billy and starting to walk towards the door. Hidden near the door, the guards' eyes widened in disbelief as they saw the child riding on the Black Panther's back. Their master's Black Panther was notoriously unapproachable, even those within the Carter estate dared not touch it. Yet today, this child was riding on its back as if it were nothing. The guards looked at each other, unable to believe their eyes, only able to watch as the Black Panther carried Billy further and further away. Not long after, the door of the dark room was suddenly pushed open from the inside. Damien Black narrowed his eyes slightly, hands clasped behind his back, saying nothing. Matthew Carter quietly stepped to his side, bowing his head and saying, "Master, do you want me to follow?" Damien Black gave a slight nod, replying curtly, "Yes, follow him." As soon as the words were spoken, Matthew Carter quickly darted forward, covering more than 10 meters in the blink of an eye, silently trailing Billy's footsteps, leaving Damien Black. Damien Black pursed his lips, feeling unaccustomed to the lack of Black Panther's protection by his side. However, the child intrigued him greatly. He rarely had such patience with a child. If the child's identity was clean, he truly wanted to keep him by his side and nurture him in the best possible way. But if he had other motives, it would be a pity. In the distance, the sky gradually brightened, the dawnlight slowly illuminating Damien Black's roof. Damien Black stood for a moment longer before turning back to his room. Without Black Panther's presence, he had to be even more vigilant. He hoped Matthew Carter could uncover something. In 5 days, they would depart for the imperial capital, and he truly didn't want anything else to happen during this time. But, as things often went, the more he didn't want something to happen, the faster and more seriously it arrived. Sure enough, early in the morning, Samuel Harris came rushing in. "Come quickly. Benjamin Young has awakened." Samuel Harris's face was filled with barely contained joy and relief. Damien raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth curving slightly. "That woman truly has some skill. Indeed, Sophia Green is truly remarkable." Samuel Harris's words were filled with admiration and trust for Sophia Green. Benjamin Young's wound suddenly worsened in the middle of the night, and Miss Green, with a slender little knife, just went to work on him. Her skill was so swift it made one dizzy. I reckon even Oliver Blake doesn't possess such ability. Furthermore, the medicine she gave Benjamin Young has greatly improved his complexion. The dark marks on his face have completely disappeared. I believe she will soon formulate an antidote, and Benjamin Young will quickly recover. Damien adjusted his thoughts, realizing the woman's surname was Green. "Master, I don't think Miss Green seems like a bad person. Otherwise, she wouldn't have dedicated herself to saving Benjamin Young like that. Perhaps she really did just accidentally intrude into Carter Manor. Most importantly, she possesses exceptional skills. Master, what do you think?" Damien glanced at him, asking, "Have you investigated her identity?" Not yet." Samuel Harris coughed lightly, chuckling, "But William Thomas has gone to investigate. I think we'll have news very soon." "I'm sure I'm not wrong, William Thomas is an expert in these matters." "In that case, let's wait until her identity is verified." Samuel Harris silently sighed. He truly felt that Sophia Green was a rare talent. Not only was she exceptionally skilled, but she also had a pleasing appearance. More importantly, she wasn't arrogant like Oliver Blake. Based on his professional eye honed over 20 years, Samuel Harris felt Sophia Green was full of righteousness, not at all like a villain. "You've been tending to Benjamin Young all day, go and rest." Samuel Harris nodded, wiping away his weary expression, and turned to return to his quarters. As he left, Damien Black's gaze shifted towards a distant pillar. Without a word, he quietly returned to his room and picked up the small box William Thomas had given him yesterday. It was something William Thomas had taken from the assassins sent by his mother. What William Thomas snatched from the assassin's hand was a still-sealed box. On it was a small, delicate left eye, seemingly meticulously crafted. He stared at it for a moment, then suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. He quickly placed the box under the table. Immediately after, Oliver Blake's voice rang out, "Master, may I enter?" Oliver Blake, carrying a small medicine box, took a deep breath and stepped heavily into the room. "Master, I've come to change your bandages. But I also happened to overhear what Samuel Harris just said." She hadn't expected that the fortunate woman, having only arrived yesterday, had already earned such high praise from Samuel Harris. Listening to the implication in her master's words, it seemed he also greatly admired her abilities. If it turned out that this woman harbored no ill intentions, then, by that time, there would be no place left for Oliver Blake in the entire Mad estate. Unacceptable. She absolutely would not allow such a thing to happen, would not allow that lustful woman to remain in Carter Manor, would not allow her to stay by her master's side. Could she truly cure Benjamin Young? Oliver Blake wanted to see how she could possibly keep Benjamin Young alive. Damien tapped his fingers lightly on the table, glanced at the small medicine box in his hand, then stood up.